On today's show, I'm going to explain why the New York Mets should absolutely want Corbin Burnes, but why a trade won't happen this offseason.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. Want to find any of my work? You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Swing for the fences on sleeper picks, and you can up to 100 times your money. Download the sleeper app, use promo code Locked On. You'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Now, from reading the title, you might already be wondering why I think the New York Mets should avoid trading for Corbin Burnes this offseason. And we will get to that in the final segment. But I want to hold off on that because there's a lot of layers to this discussion. There's the fact that David Stearns was the president of baseball operations for the Milwaukee Brewers, and now he has filled that role with the Mets, and that relationship between the Mets and the Brewers is going to be interesting to monitor over the coming years. How much of a working relationship is there? We're going to get to that a little bit in the next segment when we discuss the trade package. But first off, let's just get this out of the way. The New York Mets should absolutely want Corbin Burnes because over the last 3 years, you can make an argument he has been the best pitcher in baseball. Now, there's other guys, of course. If you look at the leaderboards, I'd say the top three just on consistency, it's probably Burnes, Zach Wheeler, and Kevin Gausman. And when you throw in the postseason success that Wheeler has enjoyed, you can make the argument that Zach Wheeler has been the best pitcher in baseball, which is something that must drive Mets fans nuts because I know personally it's tough to watch to see him blossom into this pitcher with the Phillies when there were some of us who believed it all along. But this is not a Zach Wheeler show. This is about Corbin Burnes. And this is a guy that over the last 3 seasons has been unbelievable. He has pitched to a 2.93 ERA over 93 starts and over 550 innings pitched. Guy that over the last 2 years has shown that he can take the ball every fifth day and he can be a workhorse. 200 plus innings a year ago, 193 and 2/3 innings pitched this past season. So there's that element of it. But going back to the beginning for Corbin Burnes, the reason why there's a lot of speculation linking Burnes to the Mets is because David Stearns was the guy who drafted him. It was his first draft in 2016. He took over the Brewers in 2015, and Burnes was that first class that he was able to select for himself, the 4th-round pick in that draft. He debuts in 2018, pitched to a 2.61 ERA out of the Brewers bullpen. That was the year that they had their most success under Stearns. And then 2019 rolls around. They try to make him a starter at the big league level. Doesn't work. Has a really bad year. 2020 was his first breakout. Pitched to a 2.11 ERA mostly as a starter. 2021, in his first full season as a starting pitcher in a major league rotation, going up against MLB lineups and sold out crowds across the game where he's actually getting that taste of it. He leads Major League Baseball in ERA at 2.43, had a 1.63 FIP. FIP is fielding independent pitching, which basically means that Burnes was even better than his ERA would suggest. He struck out 12.6 batters per 9, so well over a strikeout per inning. And his strikeout to walk rate was nearly 7-1. So he was the best pitcher in the National League and deserved that Cy Young. And then he hasn't been Cy Young worthy the last 2 years. I don't think he's going to win it this year. We know that's probably going to Blake Snell. And last year, Sandy Alcantara deservedly won it. Burnes finished 7th in the race, but he's shown that the Cy Young wasn't a fluke. He has shown that he is capable of being the ace of a team and really carrying you through a regular season. And obviously, there is a lot of value that would bring to the New York Mets. And there's also a lot of speculation that he could be on the move this offseason, and that's because he's going to be a free agent after this year. Not only that, they're about to go into arbitration with Burnes again, And that didn't go so well last time. This was a quote from Corbin Burnes about the arbitration process last year. I think this came around spring training when he said this. He says, quote, "You can find out your true value. You work hard for 7 years in an organization and 5 years with a big league team. You get in there and basically they value you much differently than you thought you contributed to the organization. Honestly, it's tough to hear, tough to take, but they're trying to do what they can to win the hearing. But obviously, I think there are other ways they could have gone about it. Be a little more respectful with the way that you went about it." He says that there's no denying that the relationship definitely hurt from what transpired over the last couple of weeks. There's really no way around that. That was as blunt as a player has ever been about an arbitration hearing. And part of that was they were pinning their postseason failure on him, according to what he said about that arbitration hearing. And that has led to this speculation ever since that he's going to get moved at some point, that this is not going to be the organization that Corbin Burnes is going to sign that big contract with. And that's also, of course, paired with the fact that they're not the team that spends at the top of the market. And this guy can certainly be at the top of the market when he hits free agency. He made $10.1 million when he lost an arbitration case to the Brewers last year, projected by MLB trade rumors to make $15.1 million. So he's going to see a little bit of a bump there. Now, Brandon Woodruff, he is the co-ace of the Brewers. He's going to need surgery on his shoulder. He just got it. He's expected to miss most, if not all, of 2024. So that puts the decision in the Brewers' hands. What do they do? Do they hold on to Burnes because they still want to compete next year? That's obviously something that should motivate them, right? They just won the NL Central. Or do they look at the lay of the land? They see the Reds on an upswing, the Cubs on an upswing, the Pirates even on an upswing. They might like their team, but think this is a moment where you might have to sacrifice something in 2024 to make sure that your competitive window can extend to 2025, 2026, 2027, something they just did not too far back with Josh Hader, where they traded him at the deadline to the Padres to get something in return. If they make that decision, the New York Mets will be one of the teams interested in trading for Corbin Burnes, of course, because as I just laid out, he would be the ace of the New York Mets. And a pairing of Burnes and Kodai Senga, that would be dynamic not only next year, but then you'd have the inside track to negotiate and get an extension hammered out. And then Burnes would be your ace. So there is obviously merit to it. I think the thing that I look at and the reason why the show's titled the way it is today, and the thing that I keep coming back to is, would the Brewers actually make this trade with the Mets? Because there was all of that reporting about how the Brewers almost traded for Pete Alonso. And certainly when you understand where that report likely came from, it had to be from the Brewer side. And then when Stearns eventually comes over and becomes the president of the Mets, it feels like there's a little bit of bad blood between these organizations. With that said, they made a trade at the deadline. They sent Mark Cannon to the Brewers and got Justin Jarvis in return. So something has happened there. But you still wonder, right? You wonder what that working relationship is going to be like. Can David Stearns call it Matt Arnold and hammer out a deal right now for Corbin Burnes? Or not right now, but this winter? That's the thing I don't know about. And I think the Mets might have to pay a premium in those trade talks, which is where I'd be concerned about the Mets trading for Burnes right now. I want to discuss what the package might be for Corbin Burnes. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. The NBA season is just around the corner and the NFL season is full swing. If you're interested in receiving 100 times payout on your cash with daily fantasy football or daily fantasy basketball, you got to check out Sleeper. This is where you pick more or less on stars around the game. So if it's basketball, maybe it's more or less points or rebounds or assists or three-pointers made. And you can do that with different stars, combine it, and you can win big. Pad up to 100 times. Same thing on the NFL. You pick touchdowns, rushing yards, catches, all these different things. You get your picks right, you can win big. Plus, there's built-in group chat functionality, so you can see and copy your group's picks with a tap of a button, play with your friends. Entries can be made in 30 seconds or less. It's that easy, and there's safe and fast withdrawals. If you want to try today, use promo code LOCKEDON. You're going to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. What would a trade package look like for the New York Mets to acquire Corbin Burnes? I believe the starting point is Luis Angel Acuna. And the reason why you're going to hear me float Acuna in a lot of trades this offseason where we're doing some of these, speculative shows about guys the Mets could acquire, it's because he has a certain name recognition that attracted him to the Mets that would attract him to other teams, obviously being Ronald Acuna Jr.'s little brother. It's the fact that he's a high probability big leaguer. Like, he's going to be a major league player. He brings a lot to the table. His speed is going to translate. His defense is going to translate. It can translate in multiple positions. It could be at shortstop, it could be at second base, or it could even be in center field. So that athleticism is going to pay off in a lot of ways. There's some questions about how much power is he going to ultimately be able to tap into, but there is optimism there that he could tap into a decent amount. Not his brother, but, might run into 15. And the question then becomes, how much is he going to hit? But he's a really good prospect. The reason why I will probably be floating his name a lot, it's more out of respect to Jet Williams and even Drew Gilbert to a certain extent, because I think if you're going to make a trade this offseason, those are the two prospects. If I'm David Stearns, I'm putting them and I'm taking them off the table, because I think Jet Williams has a chance to be the best one of the bunch. And Drew Gilbert, as a natural outfielder who, could be your center fielder of the future, that would necessitate or would allow, when Brandon Nimmo gets a little bit older, to slide him into a corner to left field. I think those are two guys that I just project as being such a big part of the future. Not that Acuna can't, but because you have Jet Williams, there's a little bit of overlapping skill sets. And I even think that Acuna might, depending on the team, have more trade value because of the name recognition and everything else. So let's get back to this package and why I think that is a good starting point. The New York Mets acquired Acuna for an ace. They sent out Max Scherzer to the Texas Rangers along with $35 million and got Acuna back. Now, the money in that deal is tough to compute when it comes to trade value, but here's my best way of taking a stab at that. Max Scherzer is set to make $22.5 million next year for the Rangers in particular. The Mets ate the remainder of his salary this year and the difference on the $43.3 million he's getting next season. Corbin Burnes is at $15.1 million. The Rangers made that trade at a dollar amount that they felt comfortable that they're willing to pay Scherzer next year, and they got the discount of this season cheap, plus the postseason run they're on right now. Now, hindsight's 2020. Tonight, Max Scherzer made a start coming off an injury, which was tough, but didn't pitch well. Gave up 5 runs, 4 innings. Not a good start for Scherzer. But back to the trade value, I think a year and a half of Scherzer with all the money is close to the value of a Corbin Burnes, but Burnes at $15.1 million is a really great asset for a season. Like, that is a bargain contract for the production you're going to get. So with that in mind, plus the fact that he is just a better pitcher, and then you add in the circumstance of the Brewers and the Mets and the optics of Stearns taking over the Mets and then getting his ace back, I think you have to give him more than Acuna. I do, even though you could lay everything I just said out and say it's a rental for a year. Acuna for Burnes would be fair. I'm sure some Mets fans would think that. I think it's going to cost more. Now, if you were one of my Locked On Mets insiders on Subtext, which, by the way, I love it if any of you guys would join. You get breaking news, the Inside Scoop, exclusive content delivered directly to your phone, plus one-on-one conversation with me via text, where I sent out earlier this week my proposed trade package for Corbin Burnes. If you want to join, you can find the link in the description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. But again, I sent out this trade package to the Locked On Mets insiders this week, and it was Acuna and Tyler McGill for Corbin Burnes. Now, the more I thought about this, for today's show and thought about the context, I don't see them taking that deal. The reason why I thought that there was some value in that is because I felt like, looking at the Scherzer trade, this is for a year, and McGill is a controllable pitcher that's going to be cheap for 3 years, and a team like the Brewers could use an arm like that at the back end of their rotation. I think that he'd bring some value, not to mention his brother's pitching for the Brewers out of their bullpen. But I don't know if they'd be interested in him. So then it's David Peterson. Do they feel better about him? 3 years of control. Is it Jose Budo, 5 years of control? Those are all trades that I would sign up for the Mets making. If you told me for Tyler McGill and Luis Angel Acuna, you can get Corbin Burnes, I'd say, you know what, screw it, go for it. But I don't think that that's what it's going to cost. I think they're going to ask for a better arm. So then I really believe that a realistic trade package, the more I've thought about it, is having to give up one of those AA arms or the AAA arm in Mike Vassell. So would you be willing to see the Mets trade Luis Angel Acuna plus Mike Vassell or plus Christian Scott to acquire Corbin Burnes for a year? That's where this conversation, to me, gets to a point where maybe the Mets are best keeping their powder dry and waiting for another opportunity, or trying to trade for a different pitcher this offseason if that's ultimately the route they're going to go. But I want to explain that a little bit more on where I think the Mets could go if it's not Burnes. Where that trade package could be sent for a different player and why it might be best to wait this thing out. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world today. It's important to be prepared. Supply chain shortages for medications or an inability to get medications in a timely manner due to a natural disaster, or if you're traveling abroad, this could leave you unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical created the Jase case, providing you with 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. And Jase handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Jase was doctor created and is doctor recommended. You can now customize your Jase case with dozens of add-on medications, and you can even add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. My wife and I, we love to travel, so we decided to get ourselves a Jase case just so we're prepared for whatever life throws our way. If you want to get yourself a Jase case or your loved ones, go to jasemedical.com, enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at Jase, Jase, medical.com. Now, if Matt Arnold calls up David Stearns and says, hey, I'll give you Corbin Burnes for Luis Angel Acuna and Mike Vassell, and Stearns says yes, I would not call it a bad trade. You don't know what Mike Vassell is going to be. And the assumption there is you would then sign Corbin Burnes to an extension, and guess what? You have one of the best pitchers in baseball, and you have him right now. You have him for 2024 to pair with Kodai Senga. Your offseason just got a lot easier as you're trying to build out your roster. Now you go out, you add one more arm, you're rocking and rolling, you're ready to go. So I can see the merit to it. But for me, it's not a trade that I would sign off on. If it was my decision, I don't think I'm even picking up the phone, to be completely honest. I guess maybe if you want to see what it would take, but I look at that package. Luis Angel Acuna, Mike Vassell, or if it's Luis Angel Acuna and Christian Scott. That's the starting of a pretty good Juan Soto trade package. You might have to add a little more on top, but not much. So am I really going to put that trade out there for a year of Burnes over a year of Soto? You can make an argument that Corbin Burnes is the better fit for the New York Mets next season, that he offers a skill set that you're more desperate to acquire than Juan Soto. But the exclusive rights to negotiate with Corbin Burnes, which is what you're essentially trading for, you're giving up surplus prospect value so that you are able to get an extension hammered out. That's an opportunity that intrigues me a lot more with a Juan Soto, because I don't know if Juan Soto is going to even make it to free agency, depending on what happens with San Diego. Like, I guess if they extend him, he's off the table anyway, but there's still that question over the entire year. Can they finally get a deal done? And then he hits the open market, and he's going to be the best bat available in 2025. Not that Corbin Burnes isn't going to be one of, if not the best pitcher available, but it's a lot more crowded marketplace when it comes to the 2025 free agent class. And really, I'd be waiting on that. And I think that could also carry over to how you spend this offseason. Why you might not sign an Aaron Nola or a Blake Snell or even a Jordan Montgomery, because maybe you want to save some of that long-term money for the next class, because the next class is going to include Woodruff and Burnes, the two pitchers that have been the co-aces of the Brewers. Tyler Glasnow going to be a free agent. Zach Wheeler going to be a free agent. Max Fried, Walker Buehler, even Garrett Cole has an opt-out. That 2025 starting pitching class is absolutely loaded. Now, there's a chance a couple of those names come off the board. Let's just say the Phillies win the World Series. Ugh, they might just extend Zach Wheeler. They might re-sign Aaron Nola. They might try to keep the band together. But there's going to be options, and you're going to have a chance to play on Stearns' relationship, likely with one of those guys. Woodruff coming off an injury-plagued season. Burnes potentially if he stays with the Brewers, or if he goes to a different team that doesn't get a deal done. So I wouldn't be so petrified of not getting him now, knowing that you might be able to just sign him outright in a year. And again, you look at what that package could get you when it comes to the Juan Soto trade that still could be out there. Or even if it's Manny Machado, which I think you'd have to give, you would be able to give less to get him just because the contract is so long. I don't know. We'll see if they even put him on the market. But again, the point is, I just don't think that is the time to trade Acuna for a year of Burnes, when we don't even know if the Mets are going to be great in 2024. They still got the Phillies and Braves in their division. They're going to try, but I don't think the Mets are a Corbin Burnes away from winning the World Series. But I think if they get Juan Soto, it would be under the assumption that you're going to be able to lock him up. And then you're buying into a future of Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor being your two franchise players, which I am all in on, to the point where I would be comfortable seeing the Mets trade the haul it's going to take to get him. But this offseason, I still think the best course of action is to just go all in on trying to sign Yoshinobu Yamamoto. I think that is the guy, because he's the one that I look at in this free agent class that is up there with that next group. Not necessarily that, Blake Snell isn't in the same league as Woodruff, Burnes, Glasnow, Wheeler, Fried, Buehler, Cole. But it's more that, the dollar amount it's going to take to get Snell with the injury history, that scares me. Aaron Nola, with the mileage he has and the fact that I don't think he's going to come to the Mets, don't see that as a likely fit. Yamamoto's 25 years old. Pair him with Kodai Senga, I think the Mets have a great future. So I think that's the guy that makes sense to spend money on in the rotation this offseason. And I just don't know if this is the time to trade for a pitcher in Corbin Burnes that you might be able to just sign. And instead, I'd rather see the Mets take those same pieces and go after Juan Soto. So we'll see. And of course, again, I already mentioned it, but it bears a little bit of repeating here. Do you really think that they're going to trade him to the Mets anyway? I still come back to that. I just can't envision a world where they're going to trade that significant of a piece to the Mets. It's one thing to trade a AAA arm at the deadline for Mark Canha. It's a whole other thing to trade a Cy Young to the guy who drafted him. So I think Burnes is a little bit of a pipe dream. I can see it a lot more, when it comes to the Tyler Glasnow trade, which I alluded to earlier this week. I think that is the trade that probably makes more sense under the 1-year context, that or Shane Bieber, just of what I think is more likely to happen. But again, I can also see the argument for just signing Yamamoto, cobble together some other depth arms that you find in free agency, and just roll the dice with the kids this year and see what happens when it comes to the rest of the roster. But we'll see. A lot of time for all of it. That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. If you want to join the Locked On Mets Insiders, where you get breaking news, the inside scoop, and exclusive content delivered directly to your phone, you can find the link in the description or go to subtext.com/lockedon, or follow me on X. You can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, Locked On Mets. We got to say it, Game 3 coming up, NLCS. Any chance the Diamondbacks can battle back? We'll hope so. Let's go D-backs.